to illuminate the often unseen mental health challenges faced by first responders, police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and 911 dispatchers by sharing their stories, fostering understanding, and promoting resources for support and healing. We aim to break down stigma, advocate for improved mental health services within the first responder community, and inspire hope and resilience. This is the Weight We Carry podcast.
What's going on, guys? This is Bart with the Weight We Carry podcast, and today we have Mr. John Lucas with us. What's up, John? How are you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, brother?
Man, we're doing awesome, man. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
If you'd like, man, why don't you give us a little bit of a background of your story and your expertise, and then we'll go from there, okay, brother?
Yes, sir. So I'm John. Nice to meet you guys. Been in EMS and public safety pretty much since I was 15. I'm just celebrating my 38th birthday. So moving along in the world. So we'll see what the future holds. But I'm more of a hazmat guru. That's kind of my forte. I really fell in love with it about 15 years ago. I took a hazmat tech class after you go through the operations level. Through obviously every year you got to do that for the fire department. And I was like, you know what? Let's take the technician level. And I fell in love with it. And here I am, 4 specialist titles later, and a whole bunch of extra training classes and all kinds of stuff. So I kind of my forte now, and I obviously still work full time in EMS. So that and a bunch of other little things on the side that I try to keep doing with myself to keep busy.
Play with all the bad stuff, the real scary haz stuff.
The glow in the dark stuff. I like radiation more than anything. So
just don't start glowing, man.
We're
gonna try.
Simpson.
All right, man. So like you said, you're a public safety guy, but you grew up in a public safety household. What was that like, and did it influence your decision to enter the field?
It was very different growing up. Obviously, dinners were interrupted. Meals were interrupted. Meals were late. Obviously, my father, it was a whole family. My mother was involved in it till I was born. Not too long after I was born, she started in Carnegie Fire Department in the 70s. And then my brother got involved in it my mom and my dad were both in the Crafton Fire Department together. Then my brother got into it when he was 18. And then I just kind of fell into it. I mean, you figure you grow up in that household, you're like, this is cool. Back then it was like the cool thing to do. Like, you weren't in it for the money. You were in it for, this is fun. Like, let's go do this stuff. And, obviously the volunteer community back then was a whole lot bigger. Even in the early 2000s when I got involved in it, you had 20, 30 guys on a drill night. You guys, girls, sorry, I don't mean to stereotype it, but back then it was more of a male dominant field. When you think about it, even 20 years ago, it was more male dominant. And so you go to the firehouse and there'll be 15 people there on a drill night. And you're like, dude, this is awesome. Now you go to the firehouse, you're like, there's like 5. I'm like, well, what changed? But I mean, so really growing up in it kind of really influenced me to get involved and want to do more. It took me a while to get into the EMS side of it because I was like, well, I don't necessarily know if I want to do that. I like the fire stuff. And then I was like, let's try the EMS stuff. And well, here I am a whole bunch of years later, still doing it.
I love the EMS. Ever since starting this stuff, we look back and just, reliving all these stories, like we said with Talo and everything. It's like, man, the good old days, because it was so much fun. Had a lot of fun.
The things we got away with back in, 2010 compared to what we can't get away with now. Some of it, you're like, that story we're going to take that one to the grave. We're not going to talk about that one. Oh, yeah.
So at 15, you joined the local fire department as a junior. What drew you in at such a young age? And I would assume you because you grew up with it, really.
Yeah, I mean, it was more or less like I grew up with it. And at that point, I'd moved from where we grew up in Crafton. I lived there my whole life. Then we moved out to Bridgeville. Crafton Fire Department didn't have a junior program. That didn't come about for them until several years after I'd moved away. But when we moved to Bridgeville, I was like, hey, I really don't necessarily know if I want to do this. And it was not too long after I moved to Bridgeville that I actually joined. We met their fire chief. We had an incident at our house. Wooden spoon fell down in the dishwasher and fell on the heating element and actually burnt kind of the corner of the spoon. And My mom hit the panic button at that point, was like, oh my God, the house is on fire, and didn't think to open the dishwasher and see that there was just a wooden spoon on the heating element. Burnt probably, I would say, the size of a dime corner of the spoon. I was actually away. I was deer hunting with my brother when it happened, and he was like, "Hey, the fire department's at the house." I'm like, "Oh, great. We just moved into this house like a month ago." But so like the my mom was like, "Oh, my son would be hugely interested in this," and they were like, "Well, we have a junior program. Come on down." And I went down, and it was just like they were hugely accepting. Hey, we want to get you in at a young age and kind of get you through back then it was the 88-hour essentials program.
Mm-hmm.
And, you took the essentials class, and then, hey, we're going to teach you our way. Yeah, you got the piece of paper, but now it's just like an EMS. Hey, you got that card. Now you can throw the book out the window. We're going to teach you how to be, a provider in the field.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of, that's what really kind of drew me in to want to stay in it, was the fact that they were so accepting and so wanting of us young age folks to get in there. Because, I mean, let's face it, they were all getting older. So it was like, all right, I'll gladly do this.
That's pretty cool.
So now, with over 20 years in the field, man, how have you seen the field evolved in terms of mental health awareness?
It was taboo to talk about it. I think, the three of us can all relate to that. Back when we, got involved in this and grew up in it, it was taboo even 10 years ago to talk about it. Like, the mental health was just, you don't talk about this. This isn't what we're here for. I don't know do you remember when the Mission Wellness Program started through, what was that? I don't know if it was still, was it Whoop-Ass or was it AHN at that point? It was one of the two. But it was actually, what was cool was I knew Kate. I got involved in that program because I worked with Kate at Parkview when she was part-time field medic. And, it's kind of a funny story behind that one. And we'll talk about that one later on. But she got me really into that. And it was kind of funny because I was the only time Team Green and Team Purple got along, because they both were involved in it. For folks who don't understand that one, that's AHN and UPMC actually getting along, and it doesn't happen very often.
Come to Pittsburgh, you'll see.
But yeah, so I mean, she was very much instrumental in kind of pushing the mental health side of it, because that Mission Wellness wasn't just for the physical fitness side of it, but it was more or less, we see if you change your physicality or your overall physique, it's going to change your mental health. And when they started seeing that is when that kind of was like, hey, wait a minute, we're on to something here. So that's kind of when, to me, the mental health awareness side of it kind of came into it. And then we ran a string of probably 4 or 5 in a matter of a month, where we had first responders, and mainly in the North Boroughs, first responder suicide that really started hitting home. And it was like, there's a problem. And that's when we tried to start breaking that stigma. I mean, we both know them. Obviously Bomba, he was a partner of mine at Parkview. So that was the first one that we had a police officer from O'Hara Township within short order. They were almost back to back months. So that's kind of where you started seeing, I don't want to say nationwide, but you started seeing this area actually start accepting there's a mental health problem. And then, as you started seeing more national numbers and more national statistics coming in, you realize this is more of a national level issue, not just a local thing. We're not in our own little bubble.
Everywhere.
And it finally started to, I would say, honestly, within the last 5 years, we've really started to see more of a trend towards, it's okay to say that call wasn't cool. Like, we need to talk about this call. We need to discuss what just happened there, kind of go from there with it. So it's nice to see it finally becoming recognized that there's a problem.
So you've worked in both fire and EMS. How do those roles impact mental health differently? Or if it's not different, or if it is the same?
I think the fire side, it's a little different, just because you have more time to think about it. There's more free time on that. So there's more time to kind of dwell on the incident or critique or break down the incident afterwards. Whereas EMS, you get to the hospital, you're with that patient for 20, 30 minutes, depending upon where you work. It could be, you know, an hour that you're with that patient, but you're with that patient, you deal with the call for 20, 30 minutes, drop the patient off, put your truck back together, and it's like, all right, here's your next call.
The next one.
Right.
I'm off the next one.
So you never really have time to truly process that. So I think that's where the big separation is there's no time to process the call on EMS, whereas fire, I mean, we all like to, you know, there's always that riffing back and forth between fire and EMS and, you know, the police. You see the jokes and stuff on TikTok all the time. But fire department really has that ability to come back to the station and kind of sit down at the kitchen table. You know, we all solve all the world problems at the kitchen table or the you know, the dinner table, wherever it would be. You solve all the world problems there, or the back of the bay. The couch is in the back of the bay. That's, to me, will always be the best spot in the firehouse. And you have time to sit down and break down the call and kind of, hey, did you have a problem with it? Everybody gets a chance to talk. And that's what we don't have in EMS.
Yeah.
We never really had that. So I think that's where I think the roles are different, and where there's a different impact on kind of the mental health side of it is the fact that the fire side has a chance to kind of break it down a little bit more, whereas EMS, you know, was always the redheaded stepchild. Hey, get back out there, get this next call. You know, hey, there's a dialysis patient and he's picked up. I need you to go get that right now. Like, you don't have time to sit down and breathe.
So starting at such a young age, at 15, you've been on countless scenes. What are some that have stuck with you to this day?
My first fatal fire, that one there, just the image of, you know, obviously a life that was lost, you know, it's overall sad in general, but seeing the actual victim inside the building still, that one stuck with you. And that one was not one that you just kind of go, yeah, I can kind of look past this one and, you know, move on to the next call. That one we talked about for a while. The only time I've ever called a Mayday on the radio, that one, I can literally, like, if I close my eyes right now, I could tell you exactly where I was at in the building, exactly where we were at, where my partner was. I can describe the entire room. It's just that was a scary moment, because that's where I didn't know if my partner literally just fell over dead in front of me, or, you know, was he having a medical event? And it ended up being he had a medical event, thank goodness. But those two calls on the fire side stick out the most. EMS wise, childbirth, that one's always going to be the you know, I got my stork pin over laying on the side of my desk over there. That one's always going to be right up there. That's going to be the top tier. Really, other than that, I mean, you have countless cardiac arrest saves. You never really get a chance to meet them. Like, you see services having all these ceremonies for, you know, in front of counsel for, hey, you know, you saved this person's life. I never really got fortunate enough to do that, but I mean, I've had several that have pulled through, which you know, is a rewarding experience to be a part of. When you walk into somebody being lifeless laying there, and you're like, hey, you know, we're going to give it the all effort we can, and kind of go from there. Probably one of the most iconic calls that stick out in my mind. We went to it wasn't a cardiac arrest. It was a lift assist, you know, the famous lift assist cardiac arrest call that, you know, many of us have experienced in our day in EMS. It was,
here comes an E4, turns into an E.
Well, see, the funny thing was it came in as, like, it was like an E3, because it was like, there may be a leg injury or something, or like, okay, whatever. Crew gets there. They're there for like 25 minutes, and all of a sudden the fire tones go off, additional EMS tones go off, and like, they went for a lift assist. Like, what just happened? We get there, and, you know, they're working an arrest. And I think the biggest thing of that was, we pronounced them, you know, we got permission to terminate. This was obviously during COVID, so if you didn't get anything within the certain parameter time frame, it was, you're done. You know, we're done because of the COVID, you know, scare and everything else. And the other EMT that was there first, he and I were standing at the guy's feet, because we were kind of just breaking everything down. And I looked down, and I looked at him. I was like, did you see that? He's like, yeah. Looked down again, and the guy's arm moved. And I'm like, as the one medic's out talking to the family, I looked at the paramedic that was in charge. I'm like, look down. He looked down. He's like, a couple expletives later. And I looked out. I was like, hey, John, you might want to come back here. And he's like, okay. And he comes waddling back. And I'm like, might want to tell the family we're going to be transporting. This guy is now alive. And this was 5 minutes after we pronounced him. So it was just Like that was one of those ones that you like, okay, now we got to figure out how we're getting him out of this house. You know, it was right after a snowstorm. So I think there was like a foot of snow on the ground, and it was, he wasn't a small fella. So it was like, all right, well, let's just use the reeds as a sled and just right down through the snow. And it was perfect. But it was like, okay. And then, you know, they transport him to UPMC Presby, and he did the same thing at Presby. And they were like, what? Time out. We've seen this game before. Just wait. And he went through the same process again at the hospital. And they're like, no, we have to. There's not much more we could do for this gentleman. But still, it was one of those calls where you just looked down and went, wait a minute. This guy was, you know, has been declared dead now for 5 minutes, and he just
was
moved.
asystole.
He just moved, and he put him back on the monitor real quick, and you're like, oh crap. Like, you know, it's not like the oh crap, like bad thing, like you got somebody back. It's like, oh crap, like crap. What just happened? You know, and you're like, well, it's squiggling now, so let's start doing some things. And you know, so that was one of those ones that like sticks out in your mind. But then, like I said, childbirth was probably the most gruesome but coolest thing I've ever got the chance to be a part of. You know, you walk in and you're like, hey, you're not really crowning yet. You turn around and go, never mind. Get the catcher's mitt out.
Did they name the baby after you?
Well, they failed to tell us that it was her 4th kid. I'm like, well, at this point, they're going to be coming out high-fiving you, you know?
Did they name the baby after you?
No, they,
that's crap.
I forget what they already had the names already picked out. And we both looked at each other like, well, my name's John. And, you know, we kind of, you know, my name's Eric. And I'm like, well, I don't think this is going to work. You know, John Eric or Eric John sounds pretty good. You know, EJ or, you know, whatever. But no, we didn't get lucky enough.
They didn't go for it.
No, we weren't cool enough, I guess.
So you mentioned before we were talking to you that that every call teaches you something. Can you give an example of a lesson that changed how you approach the job? There's
a lot of lessons there. Honestly, I think the more classes I've taken on, not necessarily on the EMS side, but on the fire side, kind of teaching you to take a bigger picture of the scene and not just rolling right in. I mean, let's face it, EMS, we're the biggest offenders of, we need to go in there, get that patient and get out of here. We want to get back to our hot meal that's in the truck that's going to be cold in the next 20 minutes. We want to get this thing over with. But I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is kind of looking at the scene a little bit differently. You know, coming in and going, hey, let's slow down a little bit. We need to evaluate the bigger picture here. And I've had a couple psych calls that didn't go the way that we kind of want to say drew it up, because I don't think there's ever a way we truly draw up a psych call, because every call can be different. But it didn't go the way it should have. You know, we were told he was searched, and as we're talking to him, we're like, hey, you know, you got anything in your pockets, because the hospital security is going to take it from you. They're going to hold it, put it in a, you know, bag with your name on it. When you get discharged, you can have it back. And the unfortunate part was he pulled out a pocket knife. So that kind of really changed how I go into psych calls a little bit. It was one of my first psych calls actually as a provider. You know, that was 2010 or 2009, I guess. Yeah, January 2000, I got my card. So, you know, we're going on 16 years now of kind of, I have a different approach when I walk into those types of calls. You know, obviously with the threat of breathing any type of dust on an overdose call, that really changes. You know, I've seen where somebody's actually overdosed because they touched something. So that kind of going in differently on those types of calls is something new for me. So it's just more or less being taught new lessons by reading and experiencing.
Absolutely. So we know that calls don't always have the outcome that we want. So how do you handle the emotional weight of calls with the outcome that you haven't hoped for?
That's so before we started the podcast here, I was telling you guys I do the streaming stuff. So to me, I get back to the station, it's like, you know, you write up the paperwork, you know, talk it over with your coworkers. But for me, my ultimate escape is coming home, putting my headset on, getting my computers all set up and hit and go live, and, you know, being able to talk to not public safety folks. That's to me where I truly get the benefit because I can have normal conversations. I don't have to have everybody saying, hey, you okay? Hey, you okay? You know, not that it gets annoying because it lets me know that people actually care. But there are times where you want to talk about it, and there's times where you're just like, I need like an hour to myself. Let me process in my own way. And that's how I process. Like I'll talk about it at work. I'll talk about it if we have to go through the SISM stuff. If we don't, and we get to go home, cool. I'm coming home and the first thing I'm doing, turning my computers on. You know what I mean? Like this is my escape. So that's why I enjoy this. And that's kind of how I get through bad days at work. I would say go to a Penguin game, but that's just almost as depressing as going to work sometimes. But we got baseball season coming up, so hopefully we got some promise there. I'm hoping they're looking good so far. So I'm hoping there's some promise there. I mean, going to sporting events, I travel a lot too. So to me, it's like I have like that's my, hey, I had a bad call today, but in 2 days I'm leaving. So like that's my drive and motivation to get through the rest of the week, and then I could just get away for 3 or 4 days. I was just away in Columbus this past weekend at the outdoor hockey game. So it was like, that was my escape. Like I haven't had any bad calls in a while, so knock on wood there, or I guess a knock on wood, But that was my, I'm out of here for 3 days. I don't have to worry about tones going off, radios going off, getting phone calls from bosses, nothing. So it's just, to me, that's my kind of like how I get through things is like I always have something to look forward to.
Yeah, we were talking to Jeff Kelly a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned about having the escape. And, a lot of EMTs and medics are also firefighters, and how some of them live at the fire station. And we're like, you can't have that constantly. Your brain can't be at that high drive constantly. You need to find some sort of escape that isn't public safety. Like you said, like gaming, going to hockey games, go to pirate games, exercising. Like it's super important. And I think a lot of people forget that because you get so into that public safety mode. And you're like, yeah, like I'm going to go stay here and run calls for 2 days while I'm off. And you just can't do that. You gotta give yourself that break.
Those guys that I know that get in their vehicles on a Friday and drive down to Prince George's County or, down around the DC area and run 40 calls in a weekend and then come back and like, dude, we ran like 45 calls. I'm like, I played some video games, like, it's just, but I mean, I guess everybody has their own out, and those guys love it. So, and they eat, sleep, and breathe it. I mean, trust me, I did it when I was 18. I lived at Minerva number 4 and I lived at Minerva number 1. I did the live-in thing, but to me, it's only good for so long that you got to kind of find, I don't want to say ever grow up, because you don't want anybody you don't truly want to grow up. When you grow up and be an adult, you're like, man, adulting sucks. I want to go back to being a kid. But you don't want them to lose that drive and that want to be around the firehouse. So, but there has to be that balance. And that's, I think what I found was that nice balance. Like when I leave work, I'm walking in my car, Mac 911 gets shut off. Like when I'm not there, I don't care what happens. You could have 5,500 calls. You could have 2 calls. When I'm not there, it's not my concern. That's my time to myself. It's my separation.
Yeah, absolutely. You need that. What do you think is the biggest misconception about mental health for first responders?
This one, I think, truly is a tough question to answer, just because it's the misnomer of not being able to say you're not okay. I think that's the biggest. It's more accepted now. Whereas, like I said before, it was taboo to bring it up, 5 or 10 years ago. Now it's more accepted. So I think the biggest misconception is people still think that they can't say, I'm not okay. And they don't want to get the help. And then, 6 months later, we're putting on a Class A uniform with a badge that's got a black banner on it. You know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest misconception, is now it's okay to say, hey, that's not okay with me. That didn't sit well with me. So I think that's the true big takeaway now, or the true big misconception is you can say you're not okay and it's accepted. Whereas, like I said, years ago, that was just not the thing. And I think people just don't understand that yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to reverse it on you a little bit. Have you ever felt that pressure to just push through instead of addressing mental health?
Yeah, there's been a few times, we were talking before we started streaming here, or before we started recording, I should say. We've worked at busy services where you had that call. We lucked out because we worked at services where, Ross went to McCandless or went to Passman all the time. Your quick turnaround times. I worked at Northwest. You went to Ohio Valley a lot, or you went to Allegheny General. It was still a quick turnaround time. Same with Ross. You guys came down to Mercy, or you came down to Allegheny. When you cleared the hospital, you were back in service.
Yeah, right back in service.
And
on to the next one.
And that's the thing, like exactly like he just said, you were on to the next one. You were talking, I mean, granted, Northwest was a little bit busier than Ross, but still, Ross didn't have 8-9 trucks on the road. You guys had 3 or 4 trucks on. So your call volume, 3 or 4 trucks, you're running 10, 12 calls a shift. That was pretty much us at Northwest. And there was, the busy days and the dog days of summer, the McKees Rocks area back then it wasn't the best area. They kind of closed up a lot of
It got hot, and it still gets hot over there.
But it's calmed down now. They closed down a couple of the housing communities, and they're going to turn them into some high-end developments or something like that, last I heard. But, it was, when it got to the dog days of summer, you started getting into the springtime and then all the way through summer and into mid-fall. You were running 40, 50 calls in a shift between, the 10 trucks on. I mean, granted, a couple of those trucks were the vacation stations. They were the outlying stations where they didn't do a whole heck of a lot. There was the McKees Rocks Craft and the Bellevue trucks that ran their butt off. But, that's where you felt the pressure because you didn't have time to process the call. You just were like, okay, we just dropped this one off here. Let's go get this one. It's, 3 blocks down the road. We're close to it. Let's just grab it and get it done. And so you never really, you felt the pressure to, I don't want to say be a company man, but when you worked for the right boss, you wanted to be the company man. And you wanted to be the person that went out and was like the go-getter. And that's where I think you put the extra pressure on yourself to where you never actually had a chance to say, hey, let's talk about this real quick. And you know what I mean? So that's, I think, where I felt a lot of pressure was I want to run the next call. I want to go to that next one. It sounds good. I want to go to it. Oh, I just got done with a cardiac arrest. Well, that's shooting down the street. I want to go to it. Sounds awesome. Let's go. And you're just pushing your partner. And it's like, you now looking back at it, I'm like, boy, was I dumb. Take that couple minutes to clean up your truck and just, unwind for a minute. And then, if your partner smokes or if you smoke, go have a cigarette, whatever, come back and let's go. Now we can go get the next one.
So we're going to dive a little bit into your health journey and your turning point. So at the age of 27, you had a wake-up call about your health. Can you walk us through what happened?
So, well, back then it was the cool thing to work. Or what was it, like 4 or 5 EMS jobs? Was the cool kid thing then?
So luckily for me, where I worked, that was, other than when I first started, I started at Medic Rescue down in Beaver. And then Greg was like, got a part-time position here for a wheelchair van driver. And so I was like, yep, it's my foot in the door. But I was lucky enough that I only worked there, and then I worked at the local law enforcement firearms dealer. I'm not going to mention the name, but that's, I was the main armor there for 6 years. So I never worked 2 EMS jobs at the same time or more because she kept me, she was like, yeah, you need to not do that constantly.
Yeah, that was back when, obviously EMS jobs at 27, that was 10 years ago. EMS jobs didn't pay anything. You made pennies on the dollar. So you had, if you were just an EMS person, you had 2 or 3 EMS jobs. And that was kind of where you never really got that mental health break because we were working so many different jobs. You were going from job to job. You had 3 or 4 uniforms in your car. But so that particular night, I was at Robinson EMS, just got back from a routine transfer. And I looked at my partner and the exact words were, I feel like shit. And he's like, well, yeah, you kind of, we were good but here we are several years later. We're still very good friends, but, he hooked me up to the monitor. We just did the basic vitals. We didn't go into the whole, let's do a 12 lead, let's do a 4 lead, let's do all this fun stuff. My blood pressure was through the roof. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know the top number was up around like 190, but, my pulse rate was up. Everything was elevated. He's like, there's something going on. We probably should get you up to get looked at. And I was like, well, I go to St. Clair because it's close to my house and that's my hospital. And if I had the choice between St. Clair and a different hospital that was closer to me, I'd probably go to St. Clair as well. And that's just because they can do a little bit more there. But we got up to St. Clair, went in, stepped on the scale. That was the first time I saw truly how I hate using the term fat, but truly how fat I was. And I was like, oh, that's not good. You know, I never looked down at I never really stepped on a scale once I graduated high school. It's like, I don't really need to do this except for like the routine physical at the doctor's office. And they're like, oh yeah, you're obese. No kidding. Thanks. Could have told you that without you telling me. Thanks. But that was, you know, I stepped on the scale there and I was at 354 pounds. And then, you know, doctor came in the room and it was a doctor I have huge respect for still to this day. And she was like, we got some things we got to talk about. And I'm like, okay. And when it's an EMS person and as a patient, you get told things differently than if it's my mother in the ER type thing. They will tell you the non-powder coated version, straight to the point, no punches held. And that's exactly, I think, what I needed and kind of where we went. But it was a very eye-opening night just from not feeling well. My blood sugar was through the roof. They did some lab work. My blood sugar was up over 300. So I was like, well, okay, we got some problems here. We need to start making some changes. And that was kind of, you know, how that night transpired. And it just was 4 hours or so in the ER and very much, I think, the eye-opening I needed. And here we are going on 11 years later, and I haven't looked back since.
Heck yeah. So you lost, you said, what, around like 140 pounds?
As of 2 days ago, it's about 150 now.
Heck yeah. Congratulations. I mean, you look great. Absolutely. So, losing 150 pounds is absolutely incredible accomplishment. What kept you motivated through the tough days?
Kind of having a good support system. I mean, as much as I hate saying that because it's cliche, having a support system of people that are there for you, working with people that are in your corner that are trying to do the same thing, it makes it very much easier. And this just so happened to be about the time that Mission Wellness was really coming out. And so it was easy for me to push just because I had that huge group that I could turn to people and say, hey, bad day. How can we, you know, what are you doing? Talk to some people, kind of refocus the brain, refocus the mindset. I mean, you're always going to have cheat days. You're always going to have tough days per se, but it's more or less as long as you only have one and not 3 or 4 in a row where little Debbie becomes your best friend, you know, as long as you can stay and reach out to those folks. And I still have probably, I think I have 200 contacts on my phone, and I think 100 of them are people from the group and people that I've met along the way. And it's just like, okay, I need to stay within what we have going on here, and kind of keep the focus wrapped around where I need to be. And that's kind of what kind of kept me motivated. Was I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to fall back. I didn't want to go back to, hey, you're not going to live much longer if you continue the path you're going. So that's kind of where I was like, okay, I need to I let that mindset sink in that night in the ER. And then, I mean, I had candy and all kinds of junk at the station. I was all excited to go back and eat a Snickers bar and eat like a Kit Kat bar and a bag of chips. I'm like, yeah, this is great. No, that all went in the garbage when we got back to the station just because of one word or one sentence that doctor made to me was the instant, go back, throw it away. We have to do better, or that's what's going to happen to us. And I want to have a family. I want to have, I want to grow old. I want to be the old guy that runs up to the 3rd floor, calls 911 and says, I can't walk, and make you carry me downstairs. I want to be that guy, but that what they said to me that night was like, this is, so just that alone was my motivation. But then being able to reach out and talk to people and say, hey, what are you doing? I'm having a bad day. And then it's like, 3 hours later, you're like, well, I'm not having a bad day anymore. Like I'm sitting here laughing, joking, having a good old time. That's kind of what keeps me going, even to this day. I mean, I still have those days now.
So how has this journey changed the way, which you kind of talked about, but How has this journey helped you change the way you handle stress compared to the past coping mechanisms?
Oh, well, my biggest thing right now, my biggest enemy is, monsters. Sugar
See you
free though.
chugging on that.
It's sugar free though, so there's at least that. But no, like that really what changed was just the way my stress response before was clear the call, go to the gas station, grab a big Mountain Dew or a Pepsi, 2 bags of chips, candy bars, and it's like, okay, we're celebrating. We just took this routine chest pain, go to the hospital. That was, now it's like, all right, leave the hospital, I'll have like healthy snacks. You know what I mean? Like I carry Nature Made bars with me. So it's like, yeah, I can eat that and, drink water. I always have something sugar free, like some sort of either an energy drink or soda, which I get it. Well, I'm sorry, pop. I can't say soda, but I always have some sort of sugar free drink. If it's not water, just this way, obviously I don't want to see my blood sugar go to 500, but that's kind of what I changed a little bit was the eating habits. And honestly, changing eating habits was the hardest thing to do. And once I changed, I'm like, I really don't want to fall back off that wagon because that was such a royal pain to change. I think that's the biggest and the hardest part when people go into a journey is the changing the diet. Look at what we eat every day and then say, we can't do that anymore. And
it's those years and years of bad habits and trying to break those like in a quick amount of time. It's a journey. Like we said, we've been on it also. And then you really have to retrain your brain to be like, yep, those bad habits are going to kill me. And I don't want, like you said, you don't want to go back to those habits at all.
No, it's just like training a person that comes from another EMS service. They have all the bad habits they were taught by not necessarily a lazy provider, but all the bad habits they watched and picked up. And now you have to break them of those. And I mean, how long did some people take? Some people never actually broke. And that's, that's the hardest thing to do is training your mind. Once you get the mind trained, it's like riding a bike, man. It's like if you fall off of it, it's easy to get back on as long as you get back on right now and not, oh, I'm going to get back on it next week because the next week's going to come. Then it's going to be the week after that. It's going to be the week after that. And it's going to be like everybody, the New Year's resolution. Let's go to the gym. January 1st, everybody's in the gym. February 1st, nobody's in the gym. So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. We loved late night snacking, which is probably one of the worst things you can do. So now training our brains, we're like, no, we don't need it. Nights that we still really want it, we have stock in edamame, and that's we'll heat up a bag and just split a bag of edamame and not feel so guilty.
No, when you think about it, look at the amount of stuff out there now that's the healthier selection, even for a late night snack craving, like the little rice cakes, the little Quaker rice cakes.
I love them.
I could sit there and eat like a whole bag of them, and then I'm like, man, I just ate a whole bag of these. And you look at the back at the nutritional value, you're like, yeah, all right, I'm good. I'm okay.
It wasn't a bag of barbecue Snyder's of Berlin chips, which I would have just crushed a whole bag of those for no reason.
Right. I open it up and go, oh, they smell good. And then next thing you know, you're like, where'd the bag go?
Those chocolate rice cakes, those are game changer.
The caramel ones, the little caramel ones that are like the size of like $50. Clutch.
Yep.
Clutch.
Yeah, they definitely are. So what advice would you give other first responders struggling with mental health and stress management?
Mental health wise, step up and say, I'm not okay. That is the biggest advice I could tell somebody is you need to say you're not okay and pursue the getting to talk to somebody, whether it's calling a friend. And I always try to keep friends that aren't in public safety that I could talk to just about other things. Obviously, having trusted peers that aren't going to run back and be like, hey, did you hear what, Bart called me today and said this to me? No, you need to have those trusted peers that are not going to go back and spread your business because you don't want everybody looking at you sideways. But you need to have 2 or 3 of them and then go talk to somebody. Don't be afraid to go sit down and talk to somebody. You would be surprised the amount of coping mechanisms and things that you could be taught that will fix a lot of the problems just by going and talking to somebody. And then the stress management, find an activity. I mean, literally, whether it's working out, kickboxing, yoga, I wish I was as flexible to go do yoga classes because I think it would be a lot of will take a lot of the stress off, but well, I'm not exactly limber anymore. But I mean, have an activity, have something that you can go do. Travel. I mean, that's why I travel. That's why I go to sporting events, because not because I want to go be stressed out watching the Pirates or watching the Penguins, but it's, to me, it's the thrill of going to the ballpark, going to the arena, going to another city, going to, the zoo. I mean, I've been to probably 15 or 16 different zoos and aquariums around the area. And it's like, I would go do that in a heartbeat just because I love animals. So to me, it's like, there's a good stress relief right there. Going to walk around, checking out different animals, seeing different things, experiencing different cities. Yeah, I get it. Traveling can be stressful. I understand that. Trust me, I get that. We just went through it this weekend with the way our hotel booking went. So it was a little bit of stress, but we didn't let it ruin the weekend. Excuse me. And we didn't let it ruin our weekend. We had a good time, watched some amazing hockey, got to meet some cool people and experience time away. And that's, to me, the best stress relief and best stress management there is take time for yourself.
And getting away, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, we're not getting younger by any stretch of the imagination. We're getting older, and that's what people don't understand is if you don't take the time now, you're not going to get that time back in 10 years. Mm-hmm. So take the time to your advantage and use it. And that's exactly, I live that to the fullest. Like, I'll get in the car to, if I didn't work later on today, hey, let's get in the car and let's take a road trip somewhere. You know what I mean? Go away for a night. Even just a night somewhere is like, wow, I feel like $100 bill coming back. And you're like, well, I've never seen a $100 bill in my life, so I don't know what it looks like. But,
You mentioned yoga being a good stress relief. We spoke to Jeff Kelly a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that he does yoga. So I think a good idea for an episode in the future is Jeff Kelly leading a yoga list.
I've known Jeff for a long time. I can't picture him doing yoga.
I think it'd be wonderful.
It would be fun. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think
I'm all about yoga. I'm all about it.
If I go to yoga, though, I want to go to like the puppy yoga.
Yeah, or the goat.
Not necessarily the goat one, but I'd rather go to the puppy one because I'm cool with, like, you want to tell me to get in this position and the dog comes up and lays on my back. I'm in. Like, I'm not moving. I'm cool. He could sleep right there. It's cool. Let's go.
We can't go to a puppy one because they would all come home with us.
We might be fighting in the parking lot then. Just saying, we'll be throwing down, seeing who's going to take. How about we do this? You take half, I'll take half.
Overcommitting. There's 9.
I'm like the lady on Bridesmaids that's take all of them in her car.
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, I'm down for it.
We're walking.
You know what, though? That'd be funny. You could take all the goats, though. I'm not a...
Unless at least we wouldn't have to mow our lawn, so that works.
True.
All right, John, you mentioned being pushed into a mature role at a young age after losing your father. How did that shape your resilience and your mindset?
Well, it's difficult being 12 years old and being told you're basically the man in the house. My brother at that point was engaged and was going to be moving out. He actually moved out not too long after, just because he, him and my now sister-in-law found a place, and I was like, okay. He kind of helped me for the first 6 months of trying to understand what it was being the man in the house. When you're 12 years old, you're like, hey, where am I going to go hide this magazine that nobody needs to know I have? Whereas now I have to be a lot more mature and a lot more smarter. And I don't, maybe not smarter may not be the better word there, but you have to be a lot more open-minded to changing of life. When that kind of tragic type event, I would guess is the best way to put that. I mean, it truly was we had an argument that morning. He went to work. He didn't come home. That kind of, it really changes the mindset of how quickly life can be. It's there 1 minute, it's gone the next. But being able to have an older brother that was able to talk me through some things and kind of help me get to that point. And then, when he moved out, it wasn't like I couldn't call him. It wasn't like he moved 10 states away. He moved a couple towns away. So it was, it wasn't that bad. We stayed pretty close. We fell apart a little bit, but now we're, talking a couple times a week, seeing each other as much as we can with his schedule and my schedule. But it's just that really pushed a lot to where people were like, oh, you're only like 15 years old. You're talking like you're a 30-year-old adult. And I mean, granted, I didn't have this amazingly stylish mustache going on. I had a goatee going on. So when I let that grow in a little bit, it was people, I looked older, and I didn't talk like I was, a little punk teenage kid. I talked a little bit more mature. I acted more mature because I kind of had to. And that was where the resiliency kind of, maybe not even resiliency, it's just more or less the mindset really changed, was, and being able to get through that. I had some great coping mechanisms that I was introduced to then, which, really helped out. It was nice being able to go to a place, the caring place through Highmark. They are phenomenal. You're able to go to be with your own age group. So there's, maybe 10 or 15 of you in a room, kind of sit down and talk, play games, do kind of stuff together for 3 or 4 hours a week. And it's like, this is kind of nice. People going through the same thing as you. So that kind of helps you, get you to bounce back. That's where the resiliency comes in there, is you're able to be with this group here, take what you're talking about, and then apply it later in life. And I think that's what really kind of helped me get to kind of the point I am now, where I was able to get, I don't want to say get to the point where I'm like almost like my father, whereas he was very much an educator and eager to do that stuff. I mean, I like educating people now, so it's kind of like I kind of am turning into my father, I guess you could say. But no, it's just that mindset was kind of very quick to come on, and it took a lot of time to actually understand how to be an adult when you're only 12. You know what I mean? That's a lot to take on for somebody at, that of age.
So now, as a lieutenant and an instructor, how do you encourage others to prioritize their mental health?
So on the fire side of it, with the lieutenant side of things, you kind of you watch for the signs. Being through a lot and being, an experienced person, you kind of see the signs a little bit more obvious than somebody who's like new and up and coming. They don't understand the signs. That is, to me, a huge benefit, and especially being through a lot in life, that helps out. I think that was probably the easiest thing for me to do, was being able to start seeing the signs of people going through some serious stress, or having some serious stressors go on. As an instructor, or even as a lieutenant, pushing, hey, are you okay? Are you good? And people get annoyed with it because I check in all the time, and it's like, no, there's a reason behind this, because nobody, it's still a taboo field, and I hate using that word to describe mental health and public safety, but until we break this stigma, it's going to always be considered a taboo type thing, because nobody wants to talk about it, or, you're forced to talk about it rather than I willingly want to go talk about it. It's kind of, yeah, we know about it now. We have more education out there now, but there's not enough. I don't think there ever will be enough. And I think that's something that, the podcast here is really helping break that stigma, because people are wanting to talk. People are wanting to watch. They're wanting to learn, watching Talos, sitting there watching you guys joke around. It's like, that's how we cope. That's how we cope with things. And then being able to encourage others to, hey, it's okay to not be okay. That's the biggest thing. You're not necessarily a bad person for saying, I'm not okay. Just like if I'm teaching, when I'm teaching a class, I was helping teach the other night, and every one of them that was going through the evolutions we were doing every step of the way. Are you okay? Are you good? Give me the old okay symbol, whatever you got to do. But it was multiple times, to the point where people were like, why do you keep asking if they're okay? Well, I'm putting you into a stressful environment, putting you into making you do things that might not be comfortable for everybody. They're comfortable for me because I do it, multiple times a year. But, somebody else, they're not going to be as comfortable with. So I want to make sure they're okay the entire time. And it's not necessarily a mental health side of things, but it's making sure they're okay physically. And if you let their physical aspect get ignored, then they're going to start thinking, well, am I not important to them? And, then it's going to start that snowball where it's going to end up going down the mental health track. So prioritizing, are you okay? Checking on your people. That's kind of where I really encourage others to do the same thing, because I don't want to go to another funeral. It's kind of where it comes down to. I'd rather go to your birthday party, retirement party, celebration because you got a new job, that kind of party, before I'd rather go to a funeral.
I like the analogy that someone used. Everyone in public safety is kind of like a dam, and every call you get, everything you do, it's like a log or a piece of debris smacking up against your dam, where one day your dam's just going to open and everything's going to flow out. So, making sure that you're constantly rebuilding that dam and making it stronger is important before that dam breaks, because one day it'll break and, but it might be too late. So
right. And at that point,
continue to talk about it. Yeah.
At that point, is it able to be rebuilt, or is it something where, we're in a different ball game at that point?
What role in the training aspect of your career and the continuing education play in keeping you mentally engaged and focused?
So Con Ed and EMS, I mean, we have to do the same thing every year. Protocol updates.
We love it.
Protocol updates, bloodborne pathogens every year. And it's the same guy, I swear, that teaches them both, because it's always the same monotone voice over and over and over again. But no, I mean, there's when you look at like the Con Ed classes that are being offered through like UPMC and AHN, like every third Wednesday or third Tuesday, whatever it is for UPMC, and then the ones through AHN, it's like there's always something interesting. Now it's like there's always something cool, and you're like, man, I hope I'm off that day, and you're like, damn, I work, and you're like, I'm gonna miss it. But the education on the EMS side has really changed a lot, to where there's a want to go to classes now. There's a want to go get that education now. Whereas, 10 years ago, you were like, man, I got to take like 24 hours of Con Ed the next 3 years. What am I going to do? And then like the last minute, you're like, oh, shit, I still got to get 20 hours of Con Ed, and you're like, that seeing that change is awesome. But like we've said a few times now, being on the fire side, and then, obviously being in the hazmat side of things, I always have awesome trainings I can go to. And it's unfortunate that a lot of them are not here in Pennsylvania. I go to Alabama, Colorado. Next up on my list is going to Nevada to the CTOS training facility out there. I'm always going somewhere for training. And it's not because I don't like the training programs in PA. Don't get me wrong. There are some good classes out there, but what I do and my specialties that I'm involved in, I can't take those classes here. So to me, that's what keeps me focused, is like, I want to get to the next step. I want to get better. I want to do more. And the only way I could do that is by finding these classes and taking these classes. And, it's nice because when I go to Colorado and I go to Nevada, go to New Mexico, it's all paid for. It's all, granted, I pay my taxes when I go to work, so I'm paying for my own, my own way. But it's, when you can go somewhere and, you get flown there for free, you get a rental car, you get, meals, you get everything you need, and then get taught by some of the best people in the world. It's like, that's going to make me want to go take any class I possibly could find. You know what I mean? So that's where my engagement stays well above the normal, is because I'm always looking for the next step in my kind of like career portfolio, I guess, is where I want to be able to teach these classes. And the only way to do that is go take the educator classes, go take things like that, and be able to go teach and be able to go bring back that knowledge and pass it on to the guys at the firehouse, pass it on to people I work with, and pass it on to anybody who wants to sit there and listen to me talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely think we just answered the next question about your mental well-being, being in the hazmat, and that really challenges your aptitude, and that really challenges you to begin with. So You already answered our other question, man.
Without even trying.
Without even trying. That's it. So now, do you think the stigma around mental health and public safety is improving? And I think we sort of covered this, and I do believe it is now. A lot of it's more out in the open, and it's okay not to be okay. And that's what we constantly say. Taylor said it. Every other guest, I think we've been saying that it is okay to say that you're not okay. But what do you think? What more can be done, and what more needs to be done?
What more can be done is more education. I mean, when you look at the grand scheme of things, like if we were to go on the PA Training's website right now, or look at the list of Con Ed classes for the rest of this year, it's all geared towards trauma and medical and things like that. Well, what about the unseen? And the unseen truly is mental health. When you think about it, how many, and Britt said it the best, you're a dam. And you don't see people breaking until they've already broke. So I think getting more education is what needs to be done. And then what more on top of that is actually providing better assistance. I mean, there's a few groups out there, the CISM team, they do a fantastic job. I've had them involved in a few incidents. I've dealt with the EAP program before. They do fantastic with being able to point you in the direction of like public safety geared people to talk to. And the problem is there's not many of them. That's kind of the big kind of roadblock there, is there's not many people that you can go talk to that understand the public safety thing. I shouldn't say thing, but they understand they don't understand where we're coming from. They understand the general person off the street with their mental health issues that they might be dealing with, but they don't understand public safety. And I think getting more assistance in that would do a lot for the stigma we're trying to break. And I think that's going to be the next big hurdle. I mean, is getting the education out there and being able to provide more assistance in talking to people, or providing like peer training to allow services to almost have their own. I think would probably be the best answer is, you have 2 or 3 people at each service that have to go through a training class that allow them to basically be not necessarily a certified counselor, but they have a little bit more in the repertoire. They have a little bit more that you can go back and say, hey, we had a rough call. Okay, that person come into work real quick and kind of sit down and talk to you and kind of go over the call. I think that would really go a long way. And that's more so on I hate saying EMS because it's, we're such the redheaded stepchildren, but we're the ones that don't get that break like we talked about before. We don't get that ability to sit down and say, hey, we had an issue with this call. Hey, go to the next one. Hey, here's another one. That we don't have that ability. And I think that's where it would be beneficial. And then, not only can they be beneficial for that particular service, but neighboring services, police departments, that would be, I think, would be a great tool. And I think that should be one of the next big steps we take is let's get some people actually through some training classes to better understand, even if it's through the CISM classes. Okay, they still can come back and now they're a huge asset to their service and their neighboring services, so it gives them the out. It gives somebody that, hey, let's go have a chat. Okay, you go sit down and talk for a couple hours. You know what I mean? Even if it's not a couple hours, even if it's 20 minutes, if it makes you feel better and makes that person feel that they're actually wanted and actually needed, that's going to help them go a long way. And I think that's honestly the best next step would be doing that.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And, I've talked to Britt about that, just like any critical incident, we have the CISM teams, but I think someone there, whether it's your department, your station, that has somewhat of that training, or at least has that capacity to be able to like, okay, let's debrief on this for 10, 15 minutes, and then we can further pass that along to the stress management team or whoever else that you have as an asset. But, and I feel like we can do that here also. This is a good starting and jump off point to have that conversation with people to be like, well, Yeah, John, let's start that at your station. Let's get the ball rolling on it. So I think that's a fantastic answer, and I think that's a really good concept. Of what I think we should all be trying to do is get that put out into EMS and fire and police. Try to get everyone on board with it.
Right.
So, do you believe there's any books or programs or resources that have helped you along the way that you could recommend to any other people?
Program-wise, I would say just if you can get into the CISM training, it's truly a great gateway. Not only does it help you if you're dealing with mental health issues going into it, but it allows you to be able to support your coworkers, support your peers, not necessarily even just a coworker, but support your peer. It could be somebody from, 4 counties away that's calling on the phone looking for help. That's kind of, to me, where I think that program right there alone is probably one of the best that I would recommend to anybody. And I always tell people, hey, if you see it, take it. It's a heck of a program. Books wise, the books I read don't necessarily apply to this. It's just more or less my outlet. I read a lot of biography books. I keep rereading a couple books over and over again just because they're damn good. One comes from a sniper unit deployed in Iraq. It's called Sniper One. That was a very, very good book. It's a British sniper unit. They're actually right behind me. I didn't think about turning around and looking at them. But they're the autobiography by Phil Ruvalo, who used to be the captain of Rescue 2 in FDNY. His book is fantastic. It kind of goes through the career of that. And then the last one I picked up, which ironically enough, I actually got to meet him and got a picture with him, Joe Pfeiffer. Most of us know that name very well in the fire service because he was the first arriving battalion chief of 9/11. He had command until the big dogs got there. His book is absolutely phenomenal. And I will tell you, if you think it's not okay to cry, don't read that book because you will be truly humbled. But to me, it's a great resource because like I said, I like reading, and that's the kind of books that I read. So to me, that's a resource and a book. You get to see from a perspective that nobody else saw before inside the building, upstairs, because it talks to the people that were upstairs that survived from being on the 30th floor and made it all the way out of the building. Engine 7, Ladder 1, from his headquarters, from where he was stationed at, made it out of that building from 30 floors up? Yeah, 30 or 32 floors up from the time the first tower collapsed till they made it out of the building. And just got out of the building when their building started to come down. It gives a whole different perspective to that day. Reading the resiliency of the sniper unit and how they were able to come home with very minimal casualties. And then Phil's book about Rescue 2, it's like, wow, these are some really good people. So that's, to me, those help me because I can kind of focus the brain and say, hey, what can I learn from this book? What can I apply to life? And that's where I take as much as I possibly can out of a book. There's no point reading it if you're not going to take something out of it.
All right, John, you're almost out of the hot seat. We have 2 questions left for you.
It's been fun, though.
You're doing wonderful. So you and I, we both started in public safety at a very young age. If you can go back and give advice to your younger self, what would you tell yourself?
Run. Now, if I could go back and tell myself something, it would be get the stuff done that you did in your 30s. Get it done early. I waited to look at the paramedic program until I was 36 years old. And I waited till I was 22, 23 years old before I went and took the EMT class. I should have taken it when I was 16. I should have gotten the medic class when I was 18. I would be in a whole different world right now if I'd have done that differently. And then, look back and tell myself, hey, it's, that weight loss thing that you went through, you can do that. You can do it a lot earlier. I was obviously big all the way through school. I got bullied in school, got picked on a little bit, whatever. But that was back when bullying was okay. It was like a normal thing. But, looking back at that and go, hey, make these journey steps 10 years sooner and you'll be in a whole different world. At this point, I could be working a career job somewhere. I could be well on my way to retirement somewhere instead of being still, working here in Pittsburgh area, I would say my heart's never here, hasn't been here for a long time. I kind of fell in love with the city of Baltimore. One of my very good friends works down there. And from the moment I went down there and visited him, I was like, dude, your city's awesome. Like, yeah, I get it. It gets a bad rep. What city doesn't get a bad rep? And so that's why I wish I would have changed my ways a lot sooner, because I'd be in a lot different situation in life. I wanted to do a lot of different things, and it's like, I can do them now, but I should have been doing these 10 or 15 years ago. And so it's like, go back and tell myself, dude, start doing this earlier. If I go back to 16 and start over again, whole different me would be on the table right now, and being in the hot seat. I'd be a whole different guy.
So, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned about resilience and personal growth through your journey?
Man.
Caught you on the last one.
Yeah, you really did. You saved the good one till the end. The biggest thing for personal growth for me is, and I won't even say it's personal growth. It's very rewarding when I can walk into a store and not have to go to the big and tall section. The first time I put on a pair of jeans, and when I got told I need to go shopping because your jeans don't fit anymore. They're comfortable. They're broken in. Leave me alone. But first time going in and like, well, I don't even know what size I'd be. Not sitting there with going and finding the wonderful roll tape measure thing that they throw around your waist that you used to have to get 2 of them for me. Put that around you and you go, oh, okay, I guess I'm wearing a 38 now. And you go like you sit there and you look at yourself in the mirror and you're just like, I was never this little, ever. Maybe when I was in the 5th grade. So it's very, to me, that right there is to me, my biggest takeaway from personal growth side of things is just stay humble. Stay humble to the changes that you're going through, and stay humble to actually stepping up and saying, hey, I need to talk. Hey, I have an issue. Or be the bigger person and say, I have an issue. I want to get help. And then once you get the help, say, I want to help others. I want to be able to, I know what I went through. I want to be able to step up and tell people, this is where you can be. Let's get there and make it and do it that way. I would think would be some of the biggest things I would take away from anything in my personal growth, journey. I don't like to brag about it. Yeah, I post some things on Facebook about, the picture collages from where I was to where I am now, but I don't.
Oh, I saw them.
I don't go out and, make it very well known. And I think people always yell at me like, dude, you need to tell people about that. I'm like, that's not who I was. Like, I'd rather go out and help you get there. I'd rather watch you do the same journey I did and help you and coach you through getting to where I am. And that's, to me, was part of my growth, because I was that cocky kid. I'll admit it. I mean, there's no shame in saying, hey, I was once a cocky kid. I always wanted to be better. I always wanted to be the best. Well, I went through some struggles. I got to be where I am today because I took those struggles and said, you know what? I can't be that kid. I got to be mature, realize there was an issue, make the changes. And now I'd rather take that and educate and help people get to where I am, and I think that's a huge part of the growth is changing from being cocky to being humble. And that's a big change when you think about it. You go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum in, relatively short order. So I think that's, to me, I think is a huge positive. And moving forward, staying the course and using the hurdles as building blocks, using them to get to the next step, and push forward and continue to be there as a support system. And I think that's the best way to describe the personal growth and being resilient is just, you're going to have hurdles, but you got to keep going. You got to keep pushing through. You got to keep jumping over them. I'm sure you guys have both hit hurdles and you're like, man, how am I going to do this? And then, next thing you know, here you are, your next step, you were through it. You know what I mean? It just takes, and having that ability to get through, I think is what is the biggest issue, or the biggest, I shouldn't say issue, the biggest biggest reward is tomorrow.
It's that challenge of making yourself a better version of yourself than you were yesterday.
'Cause sometimes,
And I think,
sometimes it's harder.
yeah, it is. But I mean, I think if you put your head down at night and you wake up the next morning, be like, all right, we got this. I can be a better version of myself. So it's a continual, you're always going to be working at it.
Right.
And the day that you stop doing that, and that's, hang it up, you have to try to be better. And I think all of us can be better if we continue having these conversations and helping each other through it. We have to. You have to be there as a support system to all of your other brothers and sisters, involved in public safety. And that's it, man. Like we're all here for each other. And I think we need to be a little bit more lenient on each other when it comes to that, because, people hiding it and not being able to talk about it, there's a reason for that, because it's it's the word I'm looking for. It's just how they say it. It's always been this way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of that what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. But anyways, you see what I'm getting at.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm getting at. And it's not necessarily the stigma, but it's the old guard and just saying this is how it's always been, and we're not going to talk about it. And if you want to continue to have good providers, whether it's EMS, fire, police, anything along those lines, you have to make this dialogue open, and it needs to be brought in at the beginning and continually brought up throughout the training and your continuing education.
I think that's where it could really, another talking point of where we could really hammer this home is actually in the training classes. When you walk in to EMT class, day one, you get the book and you're looking at it going, I got to read this. It's,
Caroline didn't tell me this stuff.
And you people get this book handed to them. It's 3 inches thick, and they're like, "You got to know this book to pass the test." And then you're just sitting there like, "I'm screwed." You know what I mean? But in that training class, they need to be able to devote 2 nights. I would think at least 8 hours of that class to the mental health education. These are what the resources are that are out there. You're starting here at point A. You're trying to go to point B. You want to be, you're a lay person off the street here. At the end, you're a National Registry EMT. In the middle, we need to be able to teach the people, hey, here's the steps and here's the resources. That, I think, would really help our industry. As much as it used to be, everybody would say it's a profession. It's more or less everybody looks at it as an industry now, because they're in it for, when you talk to most people nowadays, they're in it for the money. I never was in it for the money. If I was, I would have got out of this job a long time ago. But, that is, I think, where we can truly help the situation is by, in these initial classes. I mean, obviously, we really don't have the EMR program anymore because, there's not really a need for it with the way their protocols are anymore. They basically could put oxygen on somebody and stand there and stare at them until an ambulance gets there. But that's where I think we could do a lot for public safety, or at least the EMS side of it. Whereas, like we were already saying, the police have a pretty good system. I mean, I know before I left working at McCandless, they had actually had a counselor that was starting to ride with the police departments. I know Stowe Township, McKees Rocks area has like a crisis intervention team that goes out to the mental health related calls that we would always get on the ambulance. It was that dreaded call you'd see pop up on the screen where you'd see psych emergency. We're all like, we as a public safety provider going through the same thing would be like, oh, here we go again. We're going to our favorite buddy's house. Somebody grabbed their tinfoil hat or whatever, because you'd see them 3 or 4 times a week. But, we could really educate the new and up and coming if we provide the training initially in their class, devote 8 hours of that class to giving them the resources, giving them the coping mechanisms, giving them, and have somebody who specializes in psychology come in and teach those 2 classes. I think that would be huge for the industry. And then that helps right there. Now they have that understanding going in at the ground floor. Now we just have to continue building it up. You know what I mean? And I think that you kind of really, you got my mind thinking on that one. Now it's like, how can I write that proposal up? And I think that would really help our service, or really help our overall industry, because like we said, that not only helps the provider, it kind of gets them, hey, these classes are out there that I could take and go help with this stuff and get them involved more or less with the CISM team. And then it now provides more service to the community and the other first responders, because I mean, CISM teams aren't just for first responders. They're great with, the general public that was involved directly with that incident, but it also provides them a huge benefit to the first responder. But now the local fire department has a benefit that EMS service has 2 or 3 CISM certified people. The local police department, same benefit. You know what I mean? So I think maybe we start that process at the beginning, right at EMT class, and work its way through and continue that training even through the paramedic program. Incorporate that into the paramedic program where you kind of take, hey, this is like psychology 101 in EMT class, and then in paramedic class, here's psychology 201. A little bit more,
Yep.
Well, maybe not 201. 201 might not be the best number to put for that.
Not the best number.
But
or 302.
You're right. Do psychology 101 and then like advanced psychology in the paramedic side, where not necessarily we're talking about the medication side of things, but they get more of the medication education out of it, but that also now we take it a little step further and get them a little bit more of a therapeutic side of being able to talk to people more so than just like the basics. I think that would be a huge step in the direction we need.
Get your pen out and start writing, man. Let's get it put in.
I mean, I know enough people in the right spots. I might be able to get somebody to write that up.
I would. Let's do it. Get it done, because I think every guest that we've had on, we've said the same thing. It needs to be placed in that Nancy Caroline book, and and then brought up throughout every time you update. It just has to be a continual education. Is the mental health.
I think if the right people are pushed enough, and I know we talked about not making his head swell any bigger, but we could call that one friend of ours, and we could get him to help out with writing that too. And I think he gets a name on that one. Oh, we might have to get him a bigger car.
Well, everyone, if you would like to be on the show, just like John, we would love for you to reach out. TWWCpodcast@proton.me. Give us an email over there. John, is there anything else you would like to leave our guests with as we ended up?
I think we've had a good discussion. I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to say, I am not okay. That is the biggest thing, and every person on the show so far has said it. And this show is a great way to come and see other people. It's a way to interact. It's a way to comment on the videos and say, hey, I'm not okay. And somebody's going to see it and going to message you. And, it might be a random person, or it might be, one of us 3, or it might be somebody that was on the show already. Somebody's going to reach out to you and say, what's going on? Let's talk. Let's go get coffee. Everybody loves coffee in public safety. One thing is always guaranteed: coffee pot's always on at the station.
Hell yeah.
Well, now it's a Keurig. Now you got pods. So, but either way, somebody's going to reach out to you. Don't hesitate to say, I am not okay, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help you. And especially if it's somebody, like the 3 of us that have been in this field for a number of years. We've seen a lot. We haven't seen it all. Nobody can ever say they've seen it all, because if they have, they're full of it. Let's just keep going, and we'll get you through it.
And babe, would you like to add anything else?
Really put me on the spot now.
It's your turn to be on the hot seat.
I'll go for coffee. Call me.
All right, guys. Well, again, John, thank you much, brother.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's not to prolong this, but, we're friends on Facebook. We do the same thing. This podcast is just so cool to connect with people and to actually sit down and talk to them. And it was a pleasure talking to you, and we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
We've been friends on Facebook for so long, we've actually never met in person.
Yeah, let's go get coffee.
All right, let's go.
All right, guys. Again, like we said, if you want to be on the show, hit us up on the email, twwcpodcast@proton.me. Other than that, John, thank you again, man. We really appreciate it. Let's keep on fighting the stigma, and let's crush it. Let's just snuff it out and keep on having these conversations with everyone.
Absolutely.
Guys, we thank you again. Get ready for the next one. We can't wait to drop this episode for John, okay? But have a good one, and we'll see you guys on the next show.
Peace out.
Peace out. Stick around, John.
Alright.
Yeah.